I met him October of 2015 last year. And that was the year that I had started my business, and I was just kind of I took a leap of faith, and I thought, this is what God wants me to do. And so I had one of the most exciting but most difficult years of my whole life. So by the end of 2015, October, I had come to like the absolute lowest point I could have gotten to. Like I was like, I can't do this. I give up. Everything was falling apart. God, I had just truly felt like, God, I can't do this anymore, and I don't want to do this anymore. So I gave up my will. I gave up everything I had desired to do to him. And I said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. You do it. Prayed and cried and prayed. And that was like a day, 2 days before. And so then the next day, my son had gotten home from school and we needed to get groceries. So I had picked him up and we were going to get groceries, and we stopped off at Panda Express. And so I got a little kids meal for us to share, but really I didn't want it. I wanted him to eat that. I just wanted the fortune cookie, because all of 2015, every time I got a fortune cookie, it said something. It said something that was so applicable to what I was going through. So it would say something like, encouraging me to keep going with my business or to travel or something like that. So I was just like, wow, they're so on point. Like I just felt like God was sending me messages. And I had never done this before, but I prayed before I opened it, and I said, God, I need to hear from you. I need you to just tell me something. And I know this isn't how it works, and I know I'm being ridiculous, but say something to me. And so then I opened it, and I see the fortune, and I read it, and I just tossed it over into the side of my car. And I said, you know what? I kind of just laughed to myself, and I thought, it was ridiculous. I should have never even asked, and I'm sorry. Because, I was just like, I know this isn't how it works. And so I had gotten the groceries, went home, got the kids settled in, it was late, and I decided to go to Target.
The night started out with me needing a reason to not punish my son. Now, the reason why I needed to punish my son was because he had been falling short on turning in his homework. And I didn't, before I left that morning, I told him that I was gonna beat him like he was a little boy again, and I wanted that to stay on his mind throughout the day. But towards the end of the day, I felt like I really don't want to whoop this boy. I need to come up with a reason to not punish him. So I came up with this brilliant idea, and that was to go to Target and buy a personal organizer for him. And this personal organizer was going to be my way out, and it was also going to be his way out.
And so I was like walking down the aisles going toward like the home improvement stuff, and I looked over to the right, and there was like a group of people, and then I saw like this guy, and he's standing behind, and I see him. And he's like, he's cute. That's what I think in my head, but I'm like, whatever, I hate men, so who cares? But he saw me look at him, and I was like, oh no. So I looked away real quick. And then I was like, okay, that was so embarrassing. He saw me look, and he saw me look away, so obvious. So I was like, okay, whatever.
And I see that she's trying to look too. And then we finally lock eyes with each other, and I say, oh, okay, all right, I see you. I see you. She's checking me out. And I went on over to the personal organizers and started looking through some things, and I see that she's still in the same area, and she walked away and then came back through a couple of times. And I'm wondering, man, is she trying to get me to say something to her, or is she just confused?
Going around the aisle, and at the same time, I'm listening to my music, I'm texting my friend Andrea, and I'm reading emails, and I'm like completely distracted. So I go to the end of the aisle, and I'm like, I was here for something, I forgot. So then I walk around, and then I go back around, and I'm looking, but I'm not focused, so I keep forgetting what I'm there for. So I'm like going around in circles. And so I'm going around and around and around this one aisle, and he's still standing in the other aisle where like the journals and the pens and stuff were. And I was like, okay, finally realized, okay, they don't have them. So I had another idea. I was going to get some of these loose ring binders and use those to kind of like bring the chains up higher. But the loose ring binders were over where he was. And I didn't want to go where he was. So I was like, gosh, what do I do? So I was like, whatever, I have to go over there. So I get my basket and I'm walking over toward that side of Target. And of course, he walks over to me. He introduced himself, shakes my hand, and he asked me if I need help, which obviously I'm walking around in circles, so I probably look like I'm just ridiculous and lost. And so I like try to explain to him what I'm doing, and he kind of looks like he's kind of slow. He's not picking up what I'm saying. And so in my head, I'm like, oh, he's slow. He doesn't get it, whatever. So I go around the aisle, I pick up the ring binders, and he's still on the other aisle. So I go back around and I see him and I show him what I'm doing.
She said that she was trying to lift a chandelier and she wanted some S-hooks. And so we got into a conversation of where the S-hooks might be and what she's trying to do with it and how it could be done and all that. And I felt like I was getting a little bit too nerdy, so I needed to back off a little bit with all of my input, basically. And so she walked away and went away to get the S-hooks. And eventually she came back. And when she came back, she explained to me what the solution that she had come up with.
So I was just like, he's nice, but whatever. I don't like men anyway, so this is just, passing time. So at one point in the conversation, he says to me, is it just me or is it hot in here? And so now I'm like, okay, he's didn't just say that. I know he didn't just say that. I'm going to ignore him. I'm not going to respond to that. And so we keep talking, and then he says it again. He's like, is it just me or is it hot? And I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's just you. Well, then he just like says, okay, well, it's nice to meet you. And he walks away. And I'm like, oh, so I'm like, okay, I hurt his feelings.
I'm starting to feel myself flirt with her. And knowing that I'm flirting, I start to get a little bit nervous and a little warm. And so I asked her, is it me or is it hot in here? And she's just told me, no, I'm not feeling anything. And so we continue to talk. And I have a tendency of when I start to feel uncomfortable and I know that the sweat is starting to come on, I've learned to just cut the conversation short, because when I start sweating, when I'm sweating, it pours.
I had my headphones in, and apparently he came back, but I didn't realize he came back. And so he gets my attention, and I turn around, and I stand up, and there he is, and he is profusely sweating. Like, the sweat is pouring down his forehead, like dripping like he just finished running a marathon. I had never seen anything like it. And so then I'm like, he was serious. He wasn't giving me like just this lame line. He was hot because he was getting nervous. And so he comes and he's sweating, and he wants to ask me for my phone number. And so now I'm like, okay, if I say no, I'm going to be the biggest jerk. So like, how do I get out of this? Because I don't want to give him my phone number. And so I'm like, okay, I know. 2015. I said, are you married? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay, I know this game. So then I was like, are you separated? And he's like, no. And he's kind of looking like, that's weird. And I was like, okay, do you have a girlfriend?
She started hitting me with a barrage of questions. And so she gave me her phone number, and I asked her once again, is it me or is it hot, or is it hot in here? And she was like, it's you. And by this time I'm dripping sweat, and I told her that I was going to call her back. And later on that night we spoke, and we probably talked until the wee hours of the morning.
And so he calls me and we're talking, and like right in the beginning of the conversation, he's like, so what do you think about relationships and sex? And I'm like, really? Like, what in the world? Like, he asked me this right like off the bat, and I had this viewpoint on it, and I shared it and been told, like, you're ridiculous. You're not going to meet anybody like that. And, I was just being hopeful. But I told him, because I didn't care. Again, didn't like him, didn't want to be bothered. So I just was like, here, this is who I am. So I told him, and then he changed the subject, and we talked about other things, and then he came back to it, and he said, I feel like it's only fair for me to share this with you so you can make a decision on whether or not you want to proceed, he said, but um, he said, I don't want to have sex until I'm married. He's like, I've been celibate for over 8 years. And that was his desire, is to not have sex until he married again. And I was like completely like shocked. Like in that moment, I knew God was talking to me, because that was the one thing that he could have said to me that would get my attention. And that was something that was so important to me. And I couldn't believe that this guy who was so random at Target just said that to me. And so in that moment, I remember I stopped and I'm just like, okay. I like even felt like I was talking. I know I was, because he said later, like, were you talking to somebody?
And I'm wondering, man, am I getting into it with a crazy chick, or is this or is that just, well, I don't know, was she talking to her kids in the background? I don't know.
But I was like talking to God, like I was just so, and we talked for hours that day. And then we get off the phone, and the next day he called again. We talked, but I was never really still, even though that happened, I still was feeling like now isn't a good time for me. And at one point, maybe a few days into it, he said, I don't want anything from you. He said, I just want to be friends. And I was like, good, that's all I can give you. I was really telling him everything I was going through, like everything of how my life was crumbling and falling apart, thinking like if I tell him everything about myself, it doesn't matter because I don't care. And then on the other hand, like maybe he'll go away, he'll stop, because he would just text me or call me or reach out every day. And so he said at one point, he was like, and I always was like, I'm not gonna answer the phone anymore, I'm not gonna answer his text, but he said to me, if you ever don't want to talk to me, just tell me. He was like, but don't just ignore my phone calls. And at that point I hadn't been doing it, but I was thinking of doing it. And I was like, that's so weird. Like, how do you know I was thinking of doing that? And he steadily did that, where there would be times when he was just reading my mind, and I'm just like, this is strange. I prayed and I said, God, if this is who you want from me, then open my heart to receive it. And if it's not, it's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm okay if you want me to be alone for the rest of my life. I'm okay, because at this point I'm just wanting him to use me. And it was from that point on that I started to feel like my heart was like starting to open up, and I started to see him in a totally different light. And I started to like him. And so, I was looking forward to his calls, and I would look forward to his text messages, and we would go out and we would talk. And eventually, I remember I went to New Orleans for Thanksgiving, and when I got back, that night I got back, we went to dinner. We just had dinner, and we were talking, and I was telling him about this terrible, awful date I had gone on, and it was just horrible. And so he was like, oh, he's like, okay, well, he was like, if you still feel like the need to talk to other guys, that's okay. He's like, I don't feel like I need to talk to anybody else, but if you do, that's fine. And I'm like, well, we're just friends. I was like, unless you want to redefine the relationship, we're friends. We can see whoever we want to see. And so he thought about it, and he's sitting at the table, and he starts defining like the difference between dating and relationships and like girlfriend and boyfriend. Like he's given me these definitions because he's an engineer. And so he's like, well, we're past this stage, and this is what courting is, and this is. So anyway, he goes through it all, and he's like, okay, well, I think that we should be exclusive. I think it should just be me and you. And so then I was like, okay. So then that was the night that we decided to be boyfriend and girlfriend. I texted him, I said, I need to talk to you. I need to tell you some things. And so he came over that night and we talked. And I was so scared, but I told him like, okay, I need to tell you. So I told him everything.
But she needed to have a few drinks. So, and I kept asking her, I kept pressing, okay, what is it that you want to share with me? Well, Uh, she said, well, I still haven't had enough drinks. So I finally went to her house, picked her up, and we went to the park, and we sat in the car, and she laid out her whole life from the beginning all the way up until the point that I met her. And it was quite a bit for a brother to handle.
Oh my gosh, like he's gone. Like who I am was just too much. And I totally knew, like, you know, that potential was there. And I always was like, he's such a good guy. Like, he deserves a good girl, and I am not the one. But it broke my heart. Like, he didn't call, he didn't text. And when I did reach out to him, like, the next day, he just was like, I need time.
And I'm the type that if I go off and I'm thinking about something, I get a tunnel mind, a tunnel vision.
In my mind, I'm like, okay, you know, I had a good time and I enjoyed it, and I got to keep moving. Like I said, I'm going to give my life to God, and if this isn't the way that He wants me to go, then I have to go in the direction He wants me to go. But of course, I was praying, God, help us. Like I wanted Eugene. So by the end of the week, he finally was like, okay, we need to go and talk. Why don't we have dinner? So we got together that night, Friday night, and we had dinner and we talked.
And we resolved our issues. And the bottom line is nobody's perfect. And it's all about redemption and how much that person loves the Lord.
We had established our boundaries and what we were willing to do, what we weren't willing to do. And that is how we began. That is our story.